eclectic approach to homeschooling, and it's kind of funny. The longer you homeschool, the more you're buried under piles of stuff. And last night this afternoon I was actually sorting through and getting rid of some stuff from files. And in my son Kyle's file, I found this letter I'd written to the University of Dayton, trying to convince them to let him go there. And it's funny because it really applies to tonight. We started out with a packaged curriculum, but we found it to be restrictive, tying us to someone else's generic timetable of what should we learn when. And that was the same for high school. I designed my own world culture and geography course because they needed that. I wanted them to know what the rest of the world was like. And so we used material world, and they read about the bad conditions all over the world and how much people have. It's a wonderful book. And then to make it a whole curriculum, I bought the geography coloring book, which sounds really easy, but they really had to outline and color all the countries of the world. And they learned a lot from that. And I knew there were 30 lessons in here, so we did one per week, and divided this into 30. I divided the number of pages into 30. We usually did a 30-week year. So it wasn't that hard. It was just a question of writing it down. I also said that pulling together my own curriculum made it easy to best feed the needs and skills of my children. My children are all very different. I have 3. Our 2 oldest were close together in age, and so we did a lot together with them until Ryan hit 9th grade. Kyle hit 7th grade, and Katie hit 1st grade. And I hit the wall, and my husband started doing the dishes and giving me a break after supper to just relax. After that year, then we adjusted. Because I felt like I couldn't do Ryan and Kyle together as much. When Ryan was in 8th grade, I said, now this year we're going to start looking at high schools. We'll go to Hoban and St. V, and we'll look at Green High School, and we'll consider our options as far as high school goes. Why? This is working. Why would we do something else? And his logic, he was right, and he said, besides, when would I practice? Because he was at that point studying piano and organ with a very demanding teacher, and he was practicing about 4 hours a day. So he was right. So we decided to plunge into high school, which I never thought we would do, but it worked really well for us. His high school was a fine arts curriculum. When I put together his transcripts, he had on there, one year he had actually a whole credit for organ, a whole credit for piano, a whole credit for voice, because he spent the number of hours that were required. And so if you were in a fine arts school, we would have been able to do that. Then when he went on to college, he ended up enrolling at Duquesne University. I put together a big portfolio of all he had done to prove to them he had done high school. I thought I needed to do that, and the admissions counselor said, I'm not quite sure why you made this appointment. and so I thought you needed to see all this stuff. She said, oh no, homeschoolers are the least of our problems here. We're happy to have him come. And I wrote something in here about what Ryan had said about college, and I've totally forgotten this. This was 10 years ago I wrote this letter. Ryan, his older brother, Kyle's older brother, has a 3.9 grade point average at Duquesne and has had very little trouble adjusting. The biggest surprise for him was that, quote, these kids don't think for themselves, which is another great reason to homeschool, because if you send them to high school, they're going to learn to think like the peers learn to be very peer dependent. And all of a sudden you don't count because the school deals with them, not with you. And you don't count because they want to be like their peers. By the time they're 18, they're more ready for that when they go to college. So I really think homeschooling high school is one of your best investments. The peer dependency is something that my sons found amusing when they were in school. My daughter is 20, and she's living at home and going to school part-time, and she finds the girls her age silly. So she's more mature than her, and she finds them very silly. She tends to like to be with a little bit older people. But Kyle, my second son, wanted to go become a priest when he was in high school. So he did 2 years of Spanish, 2 years of Latin, which helps you do well on your college board tests. And then he said, well, let me do Spanish because a priest who knew Spanish would be really cool. So he did 4 years of languages, went to Franciscan University on scholarship, and is now back there working on his MBA as a resident director, getting his MBA for free. And he had Radlowski's son in his dorm this year, so that's cool. Yeah. And he's the one that just got married to a wonderful Catholic girl. And all three of my children, Ryan especially and Kate, plan to homeschool no matter what. Of course, Ryan has to find the right girl yet, so if anybody has he's 28. He's 28, but Kyle and Amy are more open to whatever, because Amy was not homeschooled, but they're at least considering homeschooling. So, let's see. One of the things I wrote in this letter 10 years ago is perhaps the biggest advantage of homeschooling is that the student learns the all-important lesson that what you get out of something is directly related to what you put into it, which is what they find out in high school. Especially if other children around that you're working with, they need to be independent. And they found out very quickly through homeschooling that if you focus and get it done, you could go goof around, you could go play, you could do other things. So they learned to focus on their academics so that then they could do other things. Or in college, I don't know about you, but when I went to college, it was a totally different story. So I did not focus on my education. And they had more time to develop extracurricular skills and interests, and they know they're responsible for their own education. They still feel that way. Ryan just finished his master's in music at Cleveland State and won a organ competition. He was third in a national organ competition about a year ago. Finished his master's, and his organ recital blew his dad away. We didn't know he was that good. So from having started in 8th grade and giving him the flexibility to do both organ and piano, he's now a church organist and runs he developed a Schola Cantorum, which is a Latin chant choir that is becoming nationally known now. So anyway, that would be
Have them
great.
head this way so we can see them.
What's that?
On tour, have them head through here on tour.
Yeah, that'd be great, but I don't have to do any touring. But anyway, and Kyle's working on his master's in business at Franciscan University. The eclectic thing that we did, let's see what else did I write down. So then Kyle did pre-theology kind of high school, ended up going into theology at Franciscan in the honors program, but decided he didn't want to work that hard. Because he's my fun one, he's my fun-loving person. He's very, very much a people person. So he dropped out of the pre-theology and dropped out of the honors program and went into business because it was easier. He's too much like me. But he is doing really well and is very happy. Just got back from their honeymoon. So my daughter, on the other hand, is 6 years younger than Kyle. And so by the time he went off to college, she was just in 7th grade. And she was lonely. So we had to do a little bit more going out and doing things and developing things and for her to have that social impact. And she decided very early on that her vocation was to be a wife and a mother. And so she looked at college with a very critical eye, thinking it better be a good value or I'm not going to do it. Couldn't get the scholarship she wanted at Franciscan University, so she ended up staying at home and going to Stark State part-time. But last year, what would have been her sophomore year in college, she started working full-time. So she's working full-time in developmental disabilities in Stark County with preschoolers and likes her job. She can't say she loves it, but she likes it. And she's working at Stark State part-time, and she's engaged. She's going to get married next May. But her high school was when I was in school, there was the business track, there was the high school track, and there was kind of the general track. And the girls that took home economics were on that track. Well, that was the track she did in high school. And so not every kid needs we cover the bases so that if she went to college, she'd be fine. But she really wanted to learn homemaking skills. So one of her science courses was actually very much based on homemaking kinds of things, and we tweaked it and worked with it. And she learned a lot about sewing and knitting and budgeting and all those kinds of things. She wants to be a wife and mother. So all three of my children feel very close to God. They're very close to the Catholic Church, and I thank God for that. And I really think homeschooling had a lot to do with it. Kate's junior year, I enrolled her in Shell, which was kind of like Fruits of the Spirit Academy that I teach in now. And we didn't, Brooke was waiting for me to get on board before she actually turned it into a homeschool academy. But she went into Shell, that's where she met her future husband, in an English class, because I didn't want to fight with her about the research paper, because I knew we would really lock heads. And then her senior year, I enrolled her in Buckeye Online School so she could take post-secondary classes at Stark State, which she did, and she was able to get 4 credits by the end of the year and got all A's in those, and then was able to continue on. And she might finish it, she might not. She really, again, wants to be a wife and a mother, but she's trying to get it done, so she's got a backup plan. So, and I'm trying to think what else. We did our biology lab at home. I had Ryan and Kyle do it together. Ryan was a junior, Kyle was a freshman, because I figured we needed Kyle's countenance to cut up the fish and the frog and stuff. But actually, I thought it would turn out that way. It actually was Ryan who was fascinated by the insides of the animals. And Kyle was grossed out. So at our kitchen table, we had our lab. We did we used Dr. Weil's science book, Exploring Creation through Biology or something like that. And that worked out easily. That was our lab, so that was done. That one wasn't hard. So, and I'm trying to think what else. I guess that's about it. I now teach at the Fruits of the Spirit Academy that's been mentioned, and the advantage of that really is that some subjects you can have paid the tutors that work there to do. There was a drama class this year, and there were history classes, and this year I'm going to be teaching a Catholic religious course called Understanding the Bible and Catholic Apologetics, and then the history, and then Brooke has all kinds of English classes. So, and at this point we don't have a math science person because the guys weren't really working out. These were guys that kind of needed the income, no offense to them, but if you're not a born teacher, it just doesn't work very well because you have to teach 1 day a week and then send the kids home with their assignments and then have them come back in the next week and then you teach that week. And so it works better if somebody really is.
I actually know who should do that. I'll talk about it.
Okay. But, yeah, and so anyway, I guess that's all I have to say. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Mary.